that God expects man to walk with him by faith. And the essence of faith is knowing what God has instructed, knowing what God has commanded, and trusting the boundaries that God has placed, and doing all of that based on his character as the power, as the suzerain. And so by faith, God calls Adam and Eve to walk with him, and this forms the basis of that covenant. That's why when the serpent came into the garden, the enemy, and told a lie about God, and God's image bearers who were in covenant with him chose to listen to that lie, consider that lie, and then take power for themselves outside of the covenant, outside of correct stewardship of faith. And when Adam and Eve ate the tree that God told them not to, they disobeyed God. They rejected his kingship. They rejected the covenant that he had made with them. And that's why sin is such a big deal to God. You cannot sin against holy creator God and not have to pay the consequences.
And that covenant analogy and framework and way of thinking about it really illustrates and highlights so many parts of that theology. If we go back to that example of like you're this big empire and I'm this small nation, and we enter into this covenant relationship. If you really want to understand like the fall and the rebellion of Adam and Eve, well, it would be like this lower power listening to an enemy spy and deciding, I'm going to disobey the one thing that this empire has asked me to do, and I'm going to choose to try and get power by myself to equal this. I'm breaking that covenant. That's exactly what Adam and Eve did. Even understanding what it means to be an image bearer of God can be understood through that covenant relationship. If you're in a covenant, the vassals, the lower powers, are supposed to be reflections of the power of the larger one, so that if I, as a small nation, am about to go to war, they're not worried about fighting me. And when they look at our nation, they're not judging me. They're seeing, because I'm bearing the image of this larger empire, like that's who they see. I'm bearing the image of the suzerain who is honor bound to provide and protect for me. And one other thing I really love about just this covenant theology and this way of understanding is time and time again throughout Scripture, God sets these terms for this is the covenant, and this is the agreement, this is what we're going to do. And we see it right at the beginning of Adam and Eve. Man breaks that covenant. And what does God do in response? Well, I'll tell you what he does. He makes another covenant, and he doubles down, and he makes that covenant stronger. And we see that pattern unfold throughout all of Scripture, all the way to get to Jesus, which is, in many ways, the ultimate covenant, the ultimate provision and protection. Death has no sting.